The crow rate was put into place when the Transcontinental Railway was built through Western Canada. The railways, when they built the railway, got a lot of land on either side of the railway track, which included mineral rights and a lot of valuable property. For instance, some of it went right through the national parks, and they got a lot of land, a lot of valuable property, which later on turned out to be valuable property. For that, the government had a guarantee from the railway that they would haul grain in perpetuity at a low freight rate to get the grain from Western Canada to the West Coast. And that was an agreement that worked well for Canadian farmers. It gave them a cheap freight rate for exporting grain. But as time went on after the 1950s and into the 60s, that rate, the crow rate, the cheap rate, the railway said they could not make any money out of hauling grain, or not enough money. They could make more money elsewhere. The railways, of course, at that time had divided off the land, which included the hotels they had built and all that, into separate corporations, so that was a separate entity. So on paper they could make it look like they were not making any money. And essentially that was the crow rate, and it was guaranteed on paper to Western farmers in perpetuity. Then certain farm groups, such as the Western Canadian Wheat Growers Association, said that this crow rate was subsidizing grain leaving Western Canada, and if farmers didn't have that cheap freight rate, that grain would then be used to feed cattle in Western Canada or the livestock industry, because we could export grain so cheaply it was going to export, and we weren't having value-added industries in Western Canada. It's odd that the Canadian wheat growers, who are wheat growers, were growing wheat, why their concern would be about feeding livestock, etc., etc. But eventually, the railways and the big corporations got their way, and the government in the 1980s, I guess it was, or the early 90s, got rid of the crow rate, and farmers now pay the full cost of hauling grain to the West Coast. Now there have been some limitations paid that the railways can't charge too much, but they're continuously trying to get around that. That was the crow rate, and we gave that up. Interestingly enough, getting rid of the crow rate was supposed to increase value-added industries in Western Canada, such as we'd have a thriving cattle industry, a thriving pork industry, and as well we would get better service from the railways. What happened, when the crow rate changed, the elevator system was also rationalized. We had, I don't know exactly how many, but hundreds of elevators in Western Canada, and literally, and some of that would have had to change. We had an elevator every 6 or 10 miles, and that changed. The railway said as elevator points would become much larger, and farmers now have to haul 50 to 100 miles, that they would be able to give better railway service. But nothing has changed. They still aren't giving good service. They're still holding the farmers to ransom. Whenever they can get more money to haul their grain, haul another product, they will do that. And even with modern technology and computers and all that, they still are refusing to give good service to Western grain producers. But as I said before, what is interesting is that the same people who wanted to change the crow rate and said that, like I said, that would increase livestock production and give better rail service, and that didn't happen, are the same ones who now want to change the Canadian Wheat Board and get rid of the Wheat Board, again claiming we'll have more value-added industry in Western Canada and we will all thrive. And so and that's where we are. The same group of people that said that would happen, it didn't happen, are now saying we should get rid of the Canadian Wheat Board.